Hey, good evening. Welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. I was just looking through one of my favorite books. So often we hear that expression, this really changed my life. And look at the title of this book. Quotes that will change your life. Well, will they change your life? Listen to some of these quotes. And the quote that I just opened the book to now is by my favorite writer, John Steinbeck, as you may be well aware by now, I think. John Steinbeck. John wrote, and let me just tell you that this particular section of the book I'm looking at is about love. You know, a lot of cynics talk about love not being important. Yes, well, it's a fallacy. It's a Hollywood thing, and yes, it may be all of those things, and it also happens to be the one subject that has had more written about it than possibly any other subject other than the Bible in human history. Love is everything. Even Christ talked about love and how important that was. But what did John Steinbeck say? He said, "A kind of light spread out from her, and everything changed colour, and the world opened out, and a day was good to awaken to, and there were no limits to anything, and the people of the world were good and handsome, and I was not afraid anymore." Right. That's being in love, isn't it? Because it means that somebody actually has faith in you. But some of these are funny. Not the artful postures of love, but love that overthrows life, unbiddable, ungovernable, like a riot in the heart. I like that. And nothing to be done, come ruin or rapture. And a friend of mine, Gino, would say, "Pal, you're in the boat." What's the next one? That was Shakespeare in Love. Writers Mark Norman and Tom Stoppard. Stendhal wrote this: "Half, the most beautiful half, of life is hidden from him who has not loved passionately." 1 hour of right down love is worth an age of dully living on. Measured with magnetic field meters, the electromagnetic field that the heart produces is some 5,000 times more powerful than that created by the brain. Now, whether it's true or not, I actually read somewhere that there is a kind of wiring in the heart that is similar to that in the brain. So when people say, do what your heart tells you, there may be some validity in that. Let's go on. Do you want me to tell you something really subversive? Love is everything it's cracked up to be. It really is worth fighting for, being brave for, risking everything for. And the trouble is, if you don't risk anything, you risk even more. That was Erica Young. Of all forms of caution, caution in love is perhaps the most fatal to true happiness. You know, people write in and they talk about how they want to meet there forever, and it is very sad, and yet it's incredibly inspirational that people would place so much importance on the act of being in love. I had a letter today from a lady who sent me a photograph. She's 67 years old and still looks marvellous. And she sent me a lovely photograph of herself, and she's been a widow for 30 years. she has she was filmed with two lovely kids who I assume, though she didn't tell me this, I assume that she is the grandmother of those two beautiful little girls. And she made a comment about some other subscriber that wrote about a problem, and I made a point of reading their letter out. So there you are, there's a lady of 67 who really looks marvellous, I thought, and I wrote and told her that. And yet she said something that was very poignant. She said how nice it would be to enjoy the attention of a loving man. I know that you will know who you are, and in my heart of hearts I wish you all of everything that you want. Love is the flower of life, of blossoms unexpectedly and without law, and must be plucked where it is found and enjoyed for the brief hour of its duration. That was D.H. Lawrence. Perhaps the feelings that we experience when we are in love represent a normal state. Being in love shows a person who he should be. How many times have you heard someone say, when confessing their feelings to or about someone that they are madly in love with, that it made them want to be a better person? That's just one of the things about being in love. We always deceive ourselves twice about the people we love. First to their advantage, then to their disadvantage. Well, sometimes we really do want too much. My own hard-won, hard-learned lesson in life is that you are better off with low expectations and high hopes. So keep your hopes high and your expectations low, and you'll be doing fine. But as I've already said in one of these quotes, you have to take chances when it comes to being in love. The hardest learned lesson that people have only their kind of love to give, not our kind. Now that's a particularly profound statement. The hardest learned lesson, that people have only their kind of love to give, not our kind. In other words, sometimes you really may love somebody madly, but they just can't love you in the way that you want to be loved, in the way that you feel you're loving them. We waste time looking for the perfect lover instead of creating the perfect love. Tom Robbins, a writer. The Eskimo has 52 names for snow because it is important to them. There ought to be as many for love. I like that. Love requires the utmost vulnerability. We equip someone with freshly sharpened knives, strip naked, then invite him to stand close. What could be scarier? Yeah. If two people love each other, there can be no happy end to it. Because it shouldn't end. That was Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway wrote a very good short story. The shortest story ever, I think it qualifies for being the record. And it was For Sale, Baby Boots, Never Worn. Pretty impressive. Why is this thing continually doing this noise? Okay, I think I turned it off. I have fallen in love with someone who is hiding inside you. The greatest happiness love can offer is the first pressure of hands between you and your beloved. Here's a good one. Love doesn't just sit there like a stone. It has to be made, like bread, remade all the time, made new. I remember a story where, let me just switch off this phone. Okay. I remember a story that was told about a couple who had 2 children. One was a little girl who was about 4 years old, and a newborn baby that was, well, newborn, very recently born, was born with a terminal illness that she was never going to be able to, or he was never going to be able to recover from. And the couple kept the child at home, but they had the counselling of a hospice, and the hospice came and advised them how to get through this, that they knew that their child was going to die, and they were worried. They'd reconciled themselves to this terrible loss that was to come, but they were worried about the little girl who loved her little brother so much, and they just didn't know how she was ever going to cope with it. And the hospice in time told them, it's about to happen, and you should have your daughter say her goodbye. So they spoke to the little girl and they said, your brother is going to go to heaven. Everything's going to be fine, but you must go in and don't be too upset. Just tell him how you feel and say goodbye. So they eavesdropped at the door as the little girl went in, and she spoke to her little brother, and she said, I just want you to know that you're going to heaven, and I want you to know they'll take very good care of you there. You know, you'll be just fine. Everybody's happy in heaven. And by the way, when you've gone, I won't let them flush you down the toilet like they did the goldfish. Put my magnetic glasses back on. The greatest happiness love can offer is the first pressure of hands. Senior moment, I already read that one. If we are a metaphor of the universe, the human couple is the metaphor par excellence, the point of intersection of all forces and the seed of all forms. The couple is time recaptured, the return to the time before time. Ooh, that's a deep one. Kisses are better fate than wisdom. Is suffering so very serious? I have come to doubt it. It may be quite childish, a sort of undignified pastime. I'm referring to the kind of suffering a man inflicts on a woman or a woman on a man. It's extremely painful. I agree that it's hardly bearable, but I very much fear that this sort of pain deserves no consideration at all. It's no more worthy of respect than old age or illness. I've got to open a door for a dog. Come in. That was Porgy. One is never wounded by the love one gives, only by the one the love one expects. Someone that I knew in California once told me a story, a true story from her own experience about someone that she once knew. He was an old flame, as the saying goes, and she felt so guilty about this man because she couldn't love him the way that he wanted to be loved, the way that he needed to be loved. She just couldn't love him in that way. A little bit like the quote that I just read, that people can only give you their kind of love and not give you your kind of love. Well, they parted. It was a bitter parting, with much heartache, and she remembered that she met him in the airport, just about to pass him without recognizing him, and he said hello, and then she realized who he was, and she said, I told him, standing there in the middle of the airport with all kinds of people walking around us, and both of us standing there with our suitcases and on our way into different parts of our lives, and yet we had at one time been so close. And she said, I told him how badly I felt, and I said to him, I am so sorry for how I treated you. I treated you so badly, and I've always felt so terrible about it. I'm so sorry. And he listened to this heartfelt apology, and then he burst into tears. So sometimes, boy, we do things and don't realize how hurtful they can be. When so many are lonely as seem to be lonely, it would be inexcusably selfish to be lonely alone. Play on words. Loving someone is a loss of freedom, but one doesn't think of it as a loss because one gains so much else. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Oh, isn't that the way? So often the people that write to me, and I read some extremely lonely letters, sad letters, and yet they're still believing that they can find a love that will last them the rest of their lives. And these are not people who are teenagers. These are people in their advancing years, not quite as old as me, of course, and I'm advancing faster than most. But they still believe. And it says, love is the ultimate outlaw. It just won't adhere to any rules. The most any of us can do is to sign on as its accomplice. He was still too young to know that the heart's He was still too young to know that the heart's memory eliminates the bad and magnifies the good, and that thanks to this artifice we managed to endure the burden of the past. I remember a writer, if I can remember this quote from the movie where Jodie Foster played the part of the king, and in The King and I, she was the female lead, and in that particular movie, one of the concubines of the king of Siam runs away to be with her love, and it's an extraordinary love story, that just a very, very brief little cameo in the movie. And she shaves her head and she enters the monastery that he has entered because she was taken by the king. And just to be close, she runs away, risking her life, and she goes just so that she can be near him into the monastery. Well, they get caught and they get executed, but while she is still running away, she asks Jodie Foster for help, and I think Jodie Foster says that it was, why did you choose to do this? Why did you choose? And she said, if love was a choice, who would choose such exquisite pain? How beautiful is that? Well, this is far too long now, talking about love. We're all bored to death, aren't we? Well, actually, I'm not. Thanks for looking in. This is A Foreigner in the Philippines.